So alcohol actually affects every system in our body. So we're going to see really quick improvements in things like less digestive issues. So maybe less acid reflux, less upset stomach, because alcohol in itself is not toxic to humans until you ingest it. So once we ingest it, our body says, oh, wait, that has acetaldehyde. That is a toxin. That's not working for me. And so our body is so incredible that it prioritizes the digestion of alcohol over the digestion of food. We often find ourselves eating and drinking at the same time. So what happens, we know when we think about nutrition that, okay, all that food is just hanging around while the alcohol metabolizes. So that upset stomach, that kind of indigestion stuff goes away very quickly. And our body is able to start digesting food in a normal fashion as it is intended to do.
Do you want to wake up feeling like you're stepping into who you're meant to be, into the best possible version of you? What if I told you that the key to your best life, health, and happiness are all around you? You just have to find what works for you. I'm Hope Pedraza, and I believe that there isn't just one way to live a healthy and meaningful life, and that all you need is a little inspiration to make changes that last from the inside out. Each week, I'll be sharing tangible tips and inspirational interviews to help you on your journey. These are the steps to take to improve your life and live with purpose. This is Hopeful and Wholesome. Hey y'all, welcome back to Hopeful and Wholesome. Today I have on the show Teri Patterson. Teri Patterson is a fellow functional practitioner. She's a functional nutritionist and This Naked Mind senior coach, which she'll talk about. She blends her knowledge of nutrition with her passion for living an alcohol-free life and a unique business as the Sober Nutritionist, as she calls herself. Since becoming a sober, mindful drinking coach in 2019, Teri has helped thousands of people take a break from drinking and create true wellness. She's excited to expand her mission of helping people discover true wellness to include in her signature program, The Self Experience, exclusively for women who've stopped drinking and are ready to start living. She's also the host of the popular podcast, The Sober Edge, Inspiration for Alcohol-Free Living. And that's what we're talking about today. We're talking about alcohol-free living. And no, this is not to shame you for drinking alcohol. This is not to shame you into living an alcohol-free life, because that's not what she's about. But what we are talking about is really what it looks like to live an alcohol-free life, or just to be more mindful. And that's kind of where she starts out with people too. And even if your goal isn't to live an alcohol-free life, whether that's for you or not, it really is about being more mindful. And she talks about kind of the health benefits of that, right? Why we crave sugar when we stop drinking, and like how that affects our blood sugar and what that looks like in terms of our physical health. The health benefits of maybe taking a break or just being more mindful, what it looks like to actually take a break and keep that going, and how to kind of position that for yourself if that is a goal for you. I love her perspective because, again, this isn't about shame or judgment or anything like that. It really is just about taking a more mindful approach and to have a more mindful relationship with alcohol and how that affects our health and overall well-being. Such a good conversation. I'm excited to bring it to y'all. Let's jump in.
All right, let's jump in, y'all. I'm here with Teri, and we are going to have a really enlightening conversation on kind of this sober curious movement that is coming about right now. And she is a functional nutritionist like myself, and she is the Sober Nutritionist, which I love the name, by the way. So thanks so much for joining me today, Teri.
Yes. Well, thank you for having me. Yeah, the Sober Nutritionist is fun. It really encompasses not only who I am, but what I do and what I like to share in the world.
I love that. So I guess you probably have a backstory here, right? That kind of got you into this realm. So you want to give a little insight into, I guess, what brought you here into kind of doing this Sober Nutritionist work.
Sure. Yeah. So, I mean, I think I was like most people, I drank socially. I drank when I would have dinner parties. I drank when I went to baby showers. It was just like drinking was sort of the thing. My dad was an amateur winemaker and my parents lived in the Napa Valley. And so I didn't drink a lot as a teen, but in my early 20s, my husband and I started just having fun with alcohol like most people do. And then it was probably when I was around 40, I realized that I was starting to use alcohol in more ways. It was taking up more headspace, like, oh, could I have a drink tonight? Well, when did I have a drink last time? Well, how much can I drink? Well, if I drink a cocktail, does that mean I can't have a glass of wine? And I just kind of started noticing some of those signs that, wow, this starts to feel a little different. And I didn't pay that much attention. And then another decade went by. And in my early 50s, I started really trying to moderate. And that's when I realized that the noise in my head just got louder and louder. And it was shocking to me how difficult it was to moderate. I finally reached a place where I felt like I am miserable drinking, and I'm pretty sure I'll be miserable not drinking. But maybe I should give this not drinking thing a try. And so I wasn't one of those people. I coach a lot of clients now who kind of do the stop and start and stop and start. And I never really stopped. Right. I was trying to go from basically over drinking and daily drinking. Like I didn't have a rock bottom. I didn't have a DUI. I didn't drink in the day. I didn't have to have a drink to get up, but my life just was not very fulfilling. It was really a lot of the things that I had tried to create in my life, changes mostly around my health. Like I was I called myself a wellness enthusiast. I would do all the things to have better health, except for the not drinking piece.
Right.
And I've been alcohol free for 7.5 years. And so the conversation has definitely shifted a lot since then.
Totally.
So some of it was just, I wasn't really hyper aware that there was other options out there.
Right.
And so when I stopped drinking, I didn't have any support. I didn't go to meetings. I was kind of terrified to go to meetings. I had this whole idea of what they were like.
The stigma. Yeah.
Yeah. And I live in a small town and I thought, I'm going to run into someone I know,
Somebody's going to think. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I didn't want to do that. And so I literally just through some sort of serendipitous tools that I didn't realize I was using at the time and some willpower for sure, I stopped. And one of the things I did that I now recognize is a little bit unique is that I just told everybody flat out, like I used to drink, I'm not drinking anymore. And for my clients and those in kind of that sober curious, sometimes forever can feel like a hard thought. And so I recognize that's not for everyone. But for me, what it did and what I think is so powerful about taking even a short break is it turned off the noise in my head. And once I no longer had to battle with the voice telling me, well, should I drink? Should I not drink? When did I drink last? When can I drink again? How much did I drink? What does it mean that I'm drinking so much? Once all that stopped, all I had to focus on was the how. Right. And that felt so much easier. So what happened for me next, Hope, is that I went very quickly into signing up to go to nutrition school. I thought, well, I have all this time and energy and I don't know what to do with myself. What have I always loved? So I thought I'll take my wellness enthusiast passion and I'll turn it into a wellness profession. And I thought that everybody in nutrition school, these are my people, they won't be drinking. Well, that wasn't the case. They just drank things like, low sulfite wine and the organic tequila. Yeah, because it didn't have sugar.
Right.
Very fascinating. And so I loved nutrition school. It gave me such a purpose and a focus. It took up a lot of time, which was really important in the beginning. And it also gave me this idea that I wanted to help people change their relationship around alcohol. But coming out of nutrition school, I didn't really have any tools other than, we look at gut health, we look at sleep, and we know that alcohol has a significant impact, but no one was having that conversation. And I didn't really have those tools. So 3 years after I graduated from nutrition school, I graduated with a certificate as this Naked Mind senior coach, which is a life coach with kind of this sober designation. And that's when I started coaching people around changing their relationship with alcohol. And it has been incredible. I was fortunate to work for this Naked Mind for the last couple of years and coach in some really large groups, coach in their groups that go for an entire year. So watching someone on this journey transform and discover what happens when we just sort of move alcohol aside has been fascinating and incredible.
That's amazing. That's so cool. And I love that they specifically take that approach as it's like a very niched part of life coaching. That's super cool. So what do you find are, I guess, the biggest health benefits? And you can speak from yourself or from your clients, but the biggest health benefits that people see from, and again, I like that you said that too. And it's so funny you say that about the not saying forever thing. I had someone on, it was a while back, but it wasn't in this context of talking about alcohol, but it was just basically just in life in general. Saying forever is really hard for people to grasp. So I like that. Like, this is what I'm doing right now. But anyway, health benefits that you or your clients see just from taking a break or from not drinking right now? Like, what do you see happening?
Yeah.
there?
So it's interesting that we don't really talk about the impacts of alcohol.
Right.
So alcohol actually affects every system in our body. So we're going to see really quick improvements in things like less digestive issues. So maybe less acid reflux, less upset stomach, because alcohol in itself is not toxic to humans until you ingest it. So once we ingest it, our body says, oh, wait, that has acetaldehyde. That is a toxin. That's not working for me. And so our body is so incredible that it prioritizes the digestion of alcohol over the digestion of food. So we often find ourselves eating and drinking at the same time. So what happens, we know when we think about nutrition that, okay, all that food is just hanging around while the alcohol metabolizes. So that upset stomach, that kind of indigestion stuff goes away very quickly. And our body is able to start digesting food in a normal fashion as it is intended to do. Then we also see pretty quickly, most people find within about 14 days, some people take a little longer, we start sleeping better. One of the things that's so fascinating about alcohol and sleep is alcohol is an anesthetic. And something really interesting is that in the 1970s, they actually stopped using alcohol as an anesthetic because they said it was too dangerous.
Oh, wow.
Go figure.
That's wild, right?
Go figure. So we often think we're using alcohol helps us sleep.
Right.
But alcohol just makes us unconscious. It does not create that deep and REM sleep that we need for neural detoxification, for creating short-term memories, for losing weight, for resetting hormones. So once we start sleeping better, we're going to see our system kick back into gear in all of those areas. So big impact when it comes to sleep.
Yeah.
And then your listeners may or may not know, but alcohol is both a stimulant and a depressant. And it actually creates that initial euphoric high. And then it creates all of these chemicals to balance things out. And so those chemicals are those depressants. So we create a lot of anxiety when we're drinking, just the way our body processes alcohol and the chemicals we need to get our brain back in line. We suddenly find heightened anxiety. So there actually is a term called hangxiety. And it is where people get this hangover effect that shows up as heightened anxiety.
Oh, wow. Interesting.
Yeah. So you're going to see some relief from that heightened anxiety, from that angsty feeling. Yeah.
That's amazing. And I like that you pointed out the sleep thing, because I've had conversations with people like that too, where it's like, oh no, I drink wine to help me sleep. And I'm like, it's not really how it works.
It's not really how it works. Yeah. I mean, we fall asleep. Like I remember when I stopped drinking, I went back and watched all those movies that I'd missed the second half of. Right. So we literally do, we fall asleep, but it's actually passing out.
Right. It's an actual sleep.
Which is not the same as sleep.
Right. For sure. Well, and I know a lot of times too, when, people who do like dry January or, they take a break or whatever. And it's like, sometimes it happens where, you quit one thing, but then something else kind of shows up. And I know sugar is kind of one of those things, right? So can you talk to that and maybe why the sugar thing pops up? Like we crave sugar when we stop drinking?
Yeah, absolutely. And people think that, I love that you asked that, because people often think that, well, there's a lot of sugar in alcohol.
Right.
And I mean, yes and no, there's calories in alcohol, but they're not necessarily laden with sugar unless you're like, getting drunk on 7 pina coladas. Right.
Exactly. The mixes.
Yeah. Most people, by the time they come to me to work on wanting to change their relationship, they're drinking, they are not drinking those sweet drinks with lots of sugar. So it's really more about the chemical effects in the brain. So we know that alcohol creates this dopamine explosion in the brain. And dopamine is this molecule. It's the wanting molecule. So when we feel that, our brain says, ooh, that feels good. Do more of that. So when we stop, well, first of all, when we do it on a continual basis, what we see is that our dopamine receptors kind of turn off a little bit. Our body is very resourceful. So it's like, I don't need to have these dopamine receptors turned on all the time. This gal over here, she does that on her own every single day. And so we dial down the dopamine receptors. And so when we stop drinking, we have this place where we're no longer getting that artificial hit. And then our natural dopamine receptors are not quite back up to baseline. So then what do? We eat something that has sugar in it. And our body says, oh, that feels familiar. Do more of that. And so this kind of natural craving for sugar is absolutely related to this dopamine rush that we get. And of course, we know as nutritionists that sugar is artificial sweeteners are like 1,200 times sweeter than natural sugar.
Right.
So if you eat a tart green apple, you're going to get a little bit of rush, but you're not going to get something if you eat like a handful of M&Ms or gummy bears.
Right.
And so we know that sugar is going to give us that same sense. And your brain says, okay, that feels really good. And so often people will feel like, wow, now I'm just eating sugar all the time. And so there are some ways to cut back on sugar naturally. One of the things I do, I don't know if you've ever suggested this to clients, but it's kind of fun. I say, well, when your brain is going sugar, 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 go into the kitchen and eat a pickle. Because your brain is literally going to say, what just happened? Yeah. Wait a minute. I'm no longer what?
Right.
And it's just a way of helping your brain say, hey, wait a minute. I call it bossing your brain around, right? Like there's lots of ways to boss your brain around. We think everything we think, you've got to do it. Oh, I'm craving, I feel like I want some sugar. I've got to have sugar. No, you don't. You can have something with less sugar, something that's healthier version of sugar. And the really interesting thing about food and alcohol, because I work with people in both capacities, we can remove alcohol 100%, just like I did. Oh, what a relief. I no have to decide. I no longer have to deal with that. No more chemical, effects from drinking ethanol every day. However, we know we cannot completely remove food from our diet.
Right.
And we can cut out sugar, but we're still going to eat things that are naturally sweet. And we can't forget that our body is designed to run on glucose. Like one of the reasons your body says, give me some glucose is because that's the way we are built.
Right.
So sometimes I find people saying like, oh, I'm so bad. It's just, I have an addictive personality. And it's like, whoa. I mean, maybe, but most likely you're just being a human.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. And do you find that this affects, and you work with men and women in this, do you find that it affects men and women differently? Like women have a different relationship with alcohol than men?
Well, yes. As far as the breaking up, I don't think I think the chemicals are the chemicals. The human body is the human body. You're going to have some differentials in hormones for sure. But one of the things that I have discovered on this journey of coaching, and I've literally been so lucky to have coached, thousands of people now at this point, because I coach in these big groups. And so I've seen it again and again and again. And one of the things that's so interesting is that women often drink to keep going. Like the second shift, get that second wind, get through the housework. And men drink to turn it all off and stop.
Numb out. Yeah. That's so interesting, because I feel like for me, it would do the opposite. Like I'm not a big drinker at all. And I feel like if I did that, that would like stop me in my tracks. It would definitely wouldn't give me a second wind. But I do see what you're saying. That's interesting. Do you find that it's harder for one gender or the other to stop, or is it about the same?
It's an interesting question. I work mostly with women, and it's partly, I think, because this Naked Mind, where I've done most of my group coaching, and I have my own practice as well, is run by a woman. So I think it attracts women.
Sure.
And here's the thing. You don't let go of alcohol, change your relationship with alcohol, or explore being sober curious without the physical, the mental, and the emotional piece. And a big part of this is recognizing, like, how have we been disconnected from our body? What do I really need? Just like we do with food, right? Like, what do I really need in this moment? Maybe I don't need a glazed donut. Maybe I need to call someone and have a warm conversation. And so women they tend to be, I think, more open about having those discussions. And so I have mostly worked with women. So it's a little bit of a tricky question. But what I do see is that sometimes men are more pragmatic when it comes to this journey. They might do less of the emotional work up front and maybe I'm just strong. I'm just going to make the change. And sometimes I can serve them well. And sometimes, They join the gym, they buy the Whole30 cookbook, and they throw out all the tequila in the same day, and then they're flat on the floor 3 days later.
It's too much.
Yeah. So, I think that there are some subtle differences, but basically the human body, alcohol is an addictive substance to the human body. And so it pretty much is going to react the same if we drink enough over enough time.
Right. I do find it interesting because you said it at the beginning when you were saying how, like, when you did this, was it 7 years ago? It was a totally different conversation than it is now. And there was I think it was an article maybe in Washington Post or something. It was a couple weeks ago, but it was about how much less, what is it? Gen Z, is that the current generation, whatever the generation is that's now of age to drink, that they're drinking it was a huge percentage less than the previous generation and then the generations before that. And so I'm curious, just your thoughts on that. And this kind of, we use the term like sober curious, whatever term you want to use for it. But I guess your thoughts on like what's driving it. Like, is it like a trendy thing? Do you think people are more in tune with like what you're talking about? Like, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that, there was a lot of pioneers in the last 5 or 6 years who have really opened up the conversation. Certainly Ruby Warrington, who wrote the book Sober Curious, was a big part of just, let's see if we can open up the conversation. For so long, and no knocks against AA, but for so long, there was one way and one conversation.
Right. It's true.
And that's not how I found my alcohol freedom. So I knew intuitively there was more than one way. Right. And so being able to just start to talk about what this looks like. And the biggest population that I see of the people that I work with are women in kind of that 50 to 60-year-old range. And I think there's a couple of things that happen. We go through menopause, which can be really challenging. That might show an uptick in drinking.
Sure.
For some women, empty nest, uptick in drinking. For some women nearing retirement, uptick in drinking. So there's kind of some things that may happen there. And then when we look at that much younger generation, they're really seeing alcohol as kind of their parents' drug, as opposed to something they're that interested in. And one of the most exciting things that's happening is the new marketing that's coming out around NA beverages. We're seeing big companies take a really serious look because of the popularity and the interest. And so I was on a podcast recording for a guest of mine who is sponsored by Athletic Brewing. So Athletic Brewing is the largest NA beer maker in the world. They are now the fastest growing beer maker, period.
No way. That's incredible.
Pretty exciting.
Yeah.
Pretty exciting.
I mean, that speaks to kind of where people's minds are shifting. That's crazy.
Yeah. And so I think it's actually shifting across all generations. However, it's challenging to answer it from a global or, I should say not even global, but a top-down view, because I feel like I'm in kind of this sober bubble.
The bubble, right.
I'm paying attention to it. I'm talking to other sober coaches. I'm coaching people who are looking for freedom from alcohol. I'm in groups that promote drinking alternatively. And so I there's a lot of that out there. It's also kind of that reticular activating system. What I'm focusing on is what you're seeing more of.
Yes, exactly.
So it sometimes surprises me. I had a client recently who was in Target, and she posted a picture on one of the sites I'm on, and it was a cans, and it said "She Can," and it was marketed to women, alcohol, wine in a can. And she was literally like so mad. She said, I was standing in Target just wanting to scream, like, she can what? She can't ignore her kids. She can't wake up hungover. She can do crap at her job. She was so angry. And so sometimes when I take a step back, I realize we've got a long way to grow.
Yeah. No, I totally resonate with that. And I had a guest a couple weeks ago, and we were just kind of talking about like the mommy wine culture, because she's like, sober now, and she had a journey with alcohol, but we were talking about that too, how, and she's like, in my mind, it affects women differently because of the marketing. And we were talking about how the marketing has changed, and they're marketing to moms, or, and she's like, everything you watch on TV, it's like the mom has the wine glass, or they have the, it's like, makes it look cool and fun. And if you're a mom, you have to do this or whatever. And it's the marketing to women really. And I I had never really thought about till she started mentioning, but I've seen that brand before that you're talking about. And it is crazy how so many of these places are marketing to women. It's crazy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it really is. And it's sad because the ultimate message is that, you need alcohol to deal with your kids.
Right. To deal with life.
Like, whoa, wait a minute.
Right.
What's happening here?
Exactly.
And and a lot of women have, gone down that because we, find solidarity and being able to commiserate. Momming is hard.
Right. Yeah.
For sure.
We can all agree on that part. But
I will tell you, it's not easier with a hangover.
Totally. And that's exactly what she said. That was her like rock bottom moment when she was parenting hungover, and she was like, okay, like this is not, I
gotta be an easier way.
Exactly. So do you have any like top tips or strategies that for people listening that maybe want to change their relationship with alcohol? Maybe they're interested in doing the sober thing, but they don't know. But do you just have any tips and strategies to help people just kind of shift how they look at it in their relationship with it?
Yeah, I think the very first thing for people to do is just get really curious. And so we'll use that word again, but it is kind of one of my driving values, because what I love about it is when we get curious, we suspend judgment.
Mm-hmm.
So when we're over drinking, we're often doing a lot of beating ourselves up and saying, oh, I promised myself I wasn't going to drink. Oh, I said I was only going to have 2 glasses. I was such an idiot last night. Oh, I feel terrible. Why did I do this again? And so that is already happening. So we can just let go of the judgment and say, wow, I wonder what alcohol is doing for me. Like, what are the benefits of alcohol in my life? So even just starting with that simple question, and what are the things that aren't so great about my drinking right now?
Right.
And if I stop drinking for a while, what might change? So just getting really curious, suspending that judgment for a little while, and just asking those questions as if you were a gentle and kind friend to yourself, and saying, so here's the thing. It's not about, is my drinking bad enough to quit?
Right.
It's about, is my life better with alcohol? Like, is it good enough that I should keep going? And so that is a really powerful question to just say, like, okay, I don't have to quit, but gosh, are there benefits to taking a break?
Right.
And then when it comes to health, I think there's some really cool things we can do in the very beginning. So people often come to me and say, like, okay, I'm on board now. Give me all the supplements, so that I could just hack this in a week.
Yes.
And I am like, whoa, we got to back it up, because first of all, our body has had a lot of impact from our drinking. And it just, you and I know, our body just needs to slowly get back into homeostasis. And so we can do some things like subtracting, that processed food, trying to cut back on the processed food so our body is starting to get the nutrients it needs. We're often depleted in some of our essential nutrients, particularly the B vitamins. So protein is something we can focus on. And we can also have a little bit of protein when we start to feel a little craving for a drink, because often it's a blood sugar thing. It might be a over hungry type of thing. And we need to get some protein so that our brain comes back on board and says, oh, that's right, I don't need a drink. I was just thirsty and hungry.
Right.
And then I like to have people drink, extra water to help detoxify. And I don't know if you share this little tip with your clients or not, Hope, but I have people add a little bit of sea salt.
Oh yeah. We're all about
their water. Yeah. Because we just can't get those, trace minerals in our food supply. And sometimes those alone can really help people start to, look around and say, wow, life's not so gray anymore. And so just doing simple things in the beginning. And then, as people get a little further along on their journey, sometimes supplements come into play. And so going slowly, being really gentle and kind to yourself, think about it like almost like sometimes we'll talk about, that detoxification that happens when we change our diet. It's very much the same thing. And depending upon people's addiction level, we call it, it's called alcohol use disorder now. There really is no medical term alcoholic, but in alcohol use disorder, there is a spectrum. So some people, only about 10% of the people do we find statistically are actually physically dependent. So most people can take a break without support, but do check in with your doctor. And if you are someone who finds that you have trouble getting up without a drink first thing in the morning, really be mindful of how you might navigate and get some medical support. I am not a doctor, I don't play when on the internet. And so, it is important to pay attention to how you are managing physically, but it might look like some extra naps, taking those hard workouts and substituting them for more gentle workouts in the beginning, doing some things like getting a lymphatic massage, taking a sauna. All of those things are going to be really helpful in the beginning. And so that can be a way to just have something to look forward to versus, what I'm not getting to do.
Right.
Yeah. So sometimes that mindset of this is what I'm gaining versus this is what I'm giving up can be a really powerful shift for people.
Yeah, absolutely. 100%. Yeah. Those are great tips. Thank you for sharing those, Teri. And I do have another question to ask you as we wrap up here. But before I ask you that, can you let everyone know where they can find out more about you and what you're doing as a Sober Nutritionist?
Yes. So you can find me at thesobernutritionist.com. That's my website. I'm on Instagram, Teri at the Sober Nutritionist. And then I just recently, very recently, in fact, it's launching tomorrow, a partner and I are going to be offering my Sober Girlfriends book club.
How fun.
Yeah.
I love that.
Isn't that fun? Yeah.
Yes.
We're excited because book clubs were always a thing for me in my life, but they were wine and wine clubs.
Totally. Yeah.
They were wine. We wined and then we wined. And that was just not fun when I stopped drinking. I thought, I don't want either of those in my life anymore. And so this will be an intentional place to create community, have some fun. And it's open to anyone who is exploring an alcohol-free lifestyle or somewhere curious about that. So.
Yeah, I love that. So fun. Well, of course, I'll put links to all that in the show notes so y'all can check those out. And the last question I want to ask you is, what do you think is the most important thing you can do to live with purpose?
I think I would come back to this idea of curiosity because beyond just what I mentioned about curiosity suspending judgment, I think curiosity is a place where it allows me to pursue my passions, but I don't have to. I mean, if I'm just curious about something, I could research, I could give it a try, I could explore, I could let myself be a beginner. And it may or may not turn into a passion. My husband gave me a ukulele for my birthday last year because I've always wanted to play the ukulele.
So fun.
I am not an amazing ukulele player. I cannot serenade you today. But how fun to think that, I've always been curious about what it would be like to learn the ukulele. Yeah. So I think that follow your curiosity and see where it leads. And I think you will find that it will open up a whole new opportunity for you.
I love that. I love it, Teri. Thank you so much for joining and for giving us such insightful info.
Yeah. Well, thank you for having me. And this is a conversation I think that we should all have at some point.
Yep.
Is alcohol still serving me?
Yep. I agree. Thanks so much, Teri.
Thanks for listening to Hopeful and Wholesome, y'all. If you found value in this week's episode, please subscribe on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts and leave a review to let me know what you thought. I love to know what you find useful in these episodes so I know how I can provide the most value I can to my listeners. And if you have topics that you want to know more about, I'd love to hear those as well. So shoot me a message on Instagram, Facebook, or LinkedIn. It's at The Hope Pedraza, or visit my website, hopefulandwholesome.com. Thanks, y'all.